This is the video review for Sacred Cattle. I prefer to call him Ox King, I think is a better name. From LDCX Supertrain by the Chinese company Ling. Okay, let me start with an issue right away, is this guy cannot stand up unless he's leaning against the wall. Maybe if I take out this weapon backpack. Yeah, now he's okay. But this backpack makes him way too heavy no matter how you position it. He won't stand up. So I'll probably have to do some modifying and add something to his heels here so that he'll lean forward a little bit so that he can actually balance with this backpack on his back. Okay, here's a size comparison. And just because I have these figures still out, I really like the looks of this figure. He looks really burly and bulky, and he's a freight train, which I think really reminds me of Optimus Prime in his trailer. I really like these missiles on his back. I think they could have made them a little bit more intimidating instead of just 4 little dots, but still looks good, and you can swivel them down so that they're over his shoulder. And I think that's a pretty good look too. So his weapon pod works out really nicely, and it is compatible with other figures. So it's just basically this whole section. And then you can see in the backpack they have these little rails, and that's what these tabs slot into. And it just slides right in there. And on some figures, most of the figures, it's pretty loose. Ox King is the only one that it really kind of fits into really well, especially because these figures have these tabs which kind of block it from going down, and then he doesn't have those tabs there. And then this backpack actually is not compatible with Giant Ape, which is really surprising because his train is just too narrow for this to fit. But all the other figures can use this setup. And then he's also got these spacers here, which also look kind of like missile pods. And those can be removed to give him a more streamlined look. And I actually like the look of this without his extra weapon pod, with just his basic 2-train configuration. I really like the way that that comes off as well. So you can see how he looks against Lion. And he's got a really blocky appearance, especially with the way that these shoulders are shaped. And I really like the way that looks. I really don't like this tiny little chest, especially because it's so much smaller than the actual front of the train. This missile pod actually has kind of an interesting feature. Is it actually has the same joints that these shoulders are on. So you can actually attach arms here and give him 4 arms. And we'll take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so I ripped off Lion's arms, and I'm just going to attach those to Ox King's backpack. Okay, and this is what he looks like with 4 arms. It would look a little more interesting if these arms had weapons in them. I think would be a lot more intimidating. And then these shoulders do pretty much block the arms from moving forward, so not the best configuration, but it is there. It does give a little bit of playability to the figure. It's definitely something you can do with it. Maybe that looks a little bit better. That kind of works better. Well, I think I like the missile pods better. So when I first saw this figured, I thought he looked pretty tacky and kind of like a KO, but he's really grown on me, and this is one of my favorites from the set, just the way he looks. I think the colors do work really well, even though they are kind of too much. And I would say that this robot is definitely an 8. He's really good looking. The missile pods look good on his back. He just overall really pulls off the look, and he looks really powerful and interesting. The head is pretty interesting. There's a lot going on. It's very unique. The light piping on this one doesn't work as well as the other figures. I think the visor is just a lot thicker and the light just doesn't come through as well as it does for the other figures. So to transform him, you do have to pull off his arms, same as every other figure, and you do have to pull off all his missile pod accessories too. You can transform him without taking his legs off. So you just fold up these hip skirts so that the wheels are facing forward. And then you're going to point the toes. Then swivel down these leg panels. And then you collapse the hips in. And then you click everything together. And then you're going to compress the midsection here to make the train nice and clean. You pull out the chest, and this one has a spring-loaded head gimmick too. And you put the fake chest over the head, and then finally you bring this and collapse that, and you have most of a train, just missing the back here and the front, which are what the arms are. So the arms transform the same way. You just collapse this, and then you fold it together to make the front of the train, and then you're going to fold in the fist. And then you do the same thing with the other arm, except for it's got this spring-loaded gun, which you can just push in, and then you collapse this, and this will make the rear of the train, of the freight train. And then you're going to clip that into the rear, and you clip the front into the front. And that's his two train combination, so looking pretty good. And then you have to deal with all of this, which is a lot more complicated than with Golden Phoenix. So you're going to fold up the combining tabs, and then you're just going to clip those two together, and then you have this section. And then you're going to pull off these missile pods from these combiner ports. You fold those in, and then you just fold down these segments. And this part actually does split apart, but it doesn't really have any reason to do that. There's no purpose to doing that. And then you're going to fold the two missiles sections together. And then you take the two missile sections and you plug them into each other. And then you take this port section, and that's going to plug in here. And that way you have these combiner ports exposed, so you can combine this into the middle of a train. So you can take these two trains apart, and now you can bring in this center train. I really like this gimmick because that means you can add this to other trains, and other trains can get this weapon pod. Okay, so here's the full train, completely combined, and they do a really weird thing where they combine this passenger car with the freight car, and it doesn't really make sense. There should be a seam here. Like there's a little bit of separation here, so you can kind of pretend that the train can turn around corners, but this makes it so it wouldn't be able to turn at all. It's a really weird choice that this is flush. This figure also comes with a couple of these pieces for making a joint between the trains. You've seen this in my other reviews. Okay, and then now you have this joint here. And then one really weird thing I just noticed is this combiner port has this little slot right here, this extra tab, and that doesn't really fit very well into this. It's a little bit too tight. So I don't know why they do that. This tab kind of prevents this from fitting in. I wouldn't recommend using this. So overall, good looking train mode. I like having something that's not a bullet train. So I really appreciate that this train looks completely different. I'd say it's probably like a 7 though. It's a little bland looking, especially these sections. This is really just nothing interesting happening on either of these sections. So kind of a basic looking vehicle for me. So that was my last review of the LDCX Supertrains. I really like this series. They feel really good in hand. This guy's definitely a solid 8, just like the other figures. Nothing's broken off. Everything feels nice and strong. This is definitely a toy you could give to a kid and not really have to worry about it, except for maybe these hip skirts popping off. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what other kinds of ideas they come up with. I hope this company's successful and they can do more with this line, maybe make some more stylized robots. I'd really be interested to see more of these like weapon trains that go in the middle that make new weapon pods, especially things that they can hold in their hands would be nice. and maybe even some like deluxe figures that can combine and become armor sets for these guys. I really think this line has a good future to it, and I want to see more of them. So I got mine at Sirtoys. You can get yours at the same place. I'll leave the link in the description.